Welcome back to Black Belt Husband. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We are leaving the studio and we are heading deep into the wilderness because today we are studying one of nature's most fascinating creatures, the white belt husband. Scientists have been baffled by this species for decades. While he is generally kind, usually hardworking, and often convinced he is an outstanding husband, researchers have discovered that he possesses a remarkable ability to unintentionally destroy the very environment he is trying to protect. His natural habitat consists primarily of suburban neighborhoods, Home Depot, Costco on Saturday mornings, and occasionally standing silently in the garage, pretending to organize tools while avoiding difficult conversations. Although rarely dangerous to strangers, he has been known to accidentally damage emotional safety, intimacy, romance, and connection without realizing he is the one actually doing it. So today we will observe 10 of his most common behaviors. If you recognize yourself, congratulations. Every black belt husband begins as a white belt husband. The only difference is whether or not you decide to stay there. Okay, white belt husband, trait number 1. The white belt husband believes that paying the bills is the same as leadership. Let's observe the white belt husband in his natural habitat. Notice how confidently he walks through the front door after work. He has worked hard all day, provided for his family, sacrificed, and paid the mortgage. In his mind, the mission has been accomplished. Researchers have documented an interesting phenomenon. Once the bills are paid, the white belt husband believes his leadership responsibilities have officially concluded until tomorrow morning. He may now be found reclining comfortably on the couch, watching sports, scrolling through his phone, and occasionally making eye contact just long enough to ask, "Everything good?" before disappearing back into Instagram. Meanwhile, his wife has been leading the emotional climate of the relationship, the children's conflicts, the family calendar, the discipline, the conversations, and the emotional labor of the day. She's tired. Not because he's not working, but because she feels like she's leading by herself. Now, guys, this is where we stop laughing because this is one of the biggest misconceptions in marriage. Provision, it's essential, it's honorable, it's biblical, but provision is not the same as leadership. You can finance your family without leading them. Totally separate. And there's so many good guys out there that confuse being responsible with leadership. They think I work hard, I don't cheat on her, I pay the bills, I mow the lawn, I'm leading. No, you're contributing. There's a really big difference. Black belt husband, becoming a black belt husband, understands something that white belt husbands haven't learned yet. Leadership is not about asking, what do I need to do today? Leadership asks a different question. What does my family need from me today? Sometimes they may need your paycheck. Good. Sometimes they may need your presence or your calmness. Sometimes they're going to need you to initiate hard conversations. Sometimes they're going to need you to notice that your wife is exhausted before she has to say anything about it. Leadership is about setting the tone and the temperature of your home. This is black belt principle number 1. You are the leader that sets the tone and the temperature. It's the very first principle that we teach inside Black Belt Husband. The white belt husband thinks that paying the bills makes him the leader. The black belt husband knows that leadership begins after he walks through the front door, after he has worked hard to pay the bills. Okay, white belt husband, trait number 2. The white belt husband treats feedback like an attack. So let's observe the white belt husband in the wild after his wife says something seemingly harmless, like, I wish you would have told me that you were going to be late. Notice his body language. His shoulders get tight, his jaw tightens, and within milliseconds, his nervous system concludes that he is under attack. He instinctively reaches for one of 4 survival responses: defend, explain, justify, or the counterattack. His most common mating call is, well, what about you? Researchers have observed that this phrase immediately redirects the conversation away from self-reflection and into a completely different argument. It's remarkable. Here is what is really happening. The white belt husband does not hear feedback. He hears failure. He hears you're not enough. So he feels like he has to protect himself. The problem is that every time he protects his ego, he gives up something really important. And what he gives up is the connection. His wife may be trying to communicate how something affected her, but he becomes so focused on defending his intentions that he never just understands her experience. Let's look at the black belt husband. The black belt husband has learned something really important. He's learned that feedback is just information. He has learned that he does not have to agree with every word, but he can stay curious long enough to just understand or try to understand what his wife is saying, what she is experiencing. The black belt husband understands that trying to understand somebody is not the same as surrendering, that this is an important leadership quality. You see, white belt husbands, they defend their intentions, and black belt husbands get curious about their impact. That's the big difference. Okay, white belt husband trait number 3. The white belt husband thinks that apologizing fixes things. Now watch closely. After an argument, the white belt husband delivers what scientists call the transactional apology. He says, I'm sorry. And then he waits patiently for forgiveness, like he was expecting a receipt after completing a purchase. Several hours later, when his wife is still hurting, confusion sets in. He says, I already apologized. Researchers continue investigating why this ritual rarely produces the desired results. Most men think an apology closes the chapter. For most women, an apology simply opens the door. She is asking, do you really understand me? She's asking, is this going to happen again? Can I trust you with my heart? So an apology without real change, it's always going to feel temporary. Saying you're sorry, it may acknowledge that something happened, but it does not automatically restore trust or convince her that the pattern of whatever's happening will be different. Black belt husbands, by contrast, they know something different. They know that repair, which is the real thing that matters, and they know that that's a process. So a process is involved. There's something involved in creating a process. So a process might include the apology, but he owns it, he understands it, and he changes it. And that's how trust is rebuilt. An apology acknowledges the pain, but when we know how to repair, that's what actually rebuilds trust. Okay, white belt husband trait number 4. The white belt husband thinks that sex starts in the bedroom or at bedtime. So evening approaches, picture the scene, evening approaches. And there's a very interesting behavioral shift that occurs. The white belt husband suddenly becomes affectionate. He offers compliments, perhaps a shoulder rub. Sometimes he even helps with the dishes at exactly 8:47 p.m. Researchers remain fascinated by the precision of this timing. Unfortunately, earlier footage reveals that he ignored emotional bids throughout the whole day. He missed the hug, he missed the conversation, and he missed the moment where she needed encouragement and praise. And yet he remains genuinely puzzled by the evening outcome. You see, guys, most women, they do not separate emotional connection from physical intimacy. We teach this inside Black Belt Husband, how guys and girls are so different. For most women, the two are deeply intertwined. She does not want to feel pursued only when you want something from her. She wants to feel chosen and pursued throughout the day. Black belt husbands, they understand something very important, that attraction is built in the very ordinary, the ordinary moments of life. It's built through how you greet her, how you listen to her, how you notice how she's doing. Intimacy begins long before you get into the bedroom. And this is a hard thing for guys because guys are not wired this way. You know, it's like the concept of foreplay, it does not start at bedtime. It starts with how you treat her all throughout the day. Okay, white belt husband trait number 5. The white belt husband thinks that leadership means being in charge. Okay, so observe this fascinating contradiction. The white belt husband avoids initiating difficult conversations for weeks, and then he suddenly insists on making the final decision about something. Researchers refer to this phenomenon as executive leadership without executive responsibility. It is a rare and confusing phenomenon. Most guys confuse leadership with authority. You see, leadership has nothing to do with getting your way. Leadership is taking responsibility for the emotional temperature of your home. It means initiating, owning, serving, and going first. See, the white belt husband wants the authority of leadership without carrying the responsibility or the weight that comes with it. He wants to be able to make final decisions without doing the work of building trust, communicating, direction, or listening carefully to the people that are affected by that decision. The black belt husband, in contrast, he doesn't ask, well, who's in charge? He asks, what does love require of me in this situation? Sometimes that means making a decision. Sometimes it means listening with enough humility to recognize that someone else maybe has better judgment than you in particular areas. The white belt husband wants authority, and black belt husbands embrace responsibility, and that's a key difference. Okay, white belt husband trait number 6. The white belt husband is allergic to personal growth. The white belt husband has developed an extraordinary adaptation. He believes that graduating happened years ago. His favorite phrases include, "That's just how I am," "I've always been this way," and "people need to accept me." Researchers have determined that exposure to books and coaching or honest feedback may cause temporary discomfort. In severe cases, the white belt husband may immediately begin identifying all the ways his wife also needs to improve. You see, guys, growth is attractive because growth creates hope. A stagnant dude in a relationship feels painfully predictable, while a guy that's growing feels alive. And your wife is not necessarily looking for perfection. She's not looking for perfection. Let me just say that very clearly. She's looking for evidence that you are still evolving, that you're still becoming somebody. She wants to know that the behavior hurting the marriage is not permanent. She wants to know that when you become aware of blind spots, you will confront it instead of building a legal defense around it. You see, by contrast, black belt husbands are always in training. The black belt husband understands that he has never arrived. And so he always remains coachable. And the moment he thinks he has finished growing is the moment he starts shrinking. The prize is not the man who has arrived. There's no such thing. It's the man who is still willing to become different. Okay, white belt husband, trait number 7. The white belt husband thinks listening means waiting to talk. Notice how the white belt husband nods politely while his wife speaks. This gives the appearance of listening. However, brain scans reveal that he stopped listening approximately 30 seconds ago and is now mentally rehearsing his rebuttal. Researchers call this competitive listening. He is not entering her experience. He's not trying to understand more what he's doing. He's collecting evidence for his defense. He is listening for an inaccurate detail, an exaggeration, or any kind of opening that allows him to explain what really happened. Guys, listening is not about collecting evidence for your defense. It's about entering someone else's experience. Most wives do not need an immediate solution. They just want to feel understood. When you become a black belt husband, you understand that you are listening for understanding. You learn how to ask questions like, tell me more about that, or what was the hardest part about that? Or questions like, what do you wish I understood more about that? He does not listen because his wife is always right. He listens because the relationship matters more than winning the exchange. Listening is not waiting for your turn to talk. It's giving someone else theirs. Okay, white belt husband, trait number 8. The white belt husband cannot regulate himself. When confronted with stress, the white belt husband displays one of several instinctive responses. He withdraws, he raises his voice, he becomes sarcastic, or he shuts down and announces, I'm fine. Researchers unanimously agree that he is actually not fine. Many men think that emotional regulation means having no emotions at all. That is not regulation. That is suppression. And suppression usually works until the pressure of something eventually escapes and it comes out through anger or withdrawal, sarcasm, or shutting down, or some argument that's completely unrelated to the thing that you're talking about. Your emotional state becomes part of the emotional ceiling of your home. So if you panic, everyone feels it. If you explode, everyone feels that also. If you shut down, if you disappear, everyone learns what you're teaching everyone is that difficult emotions are going to lead to abandonment. A black belt husband, by contrast, he is not emotionless. He is emotionally disciplined. There's a really important difference. He notices when his nervous system is moving into fight or flight, and he creates space for himself between what he feels and the behavior in what he does next. He can feel anger without becoming cruel. He can experience shame without collapsing. He can ask for a break without abandoning the conversation. So he can return when he says that he'll return. The strongest guy is not the loudest. He is the steadiest, and his wife and children experience him as a place of safety. The strongest man in the room is usually the calmest. Okay, white belt husband, trait number 9. The white belt husband wants his wife to change first. Perhaps the white belt husband's greatest survival strategy is really just waiting. He waits for her to apologize, for the counseling to work on her, for things to improve, for her to become more affectionate, for the right moment to begin doing his part. He is the king of waiting. Researchers estimate that resentment grows considerably faster for marriages during this waiting period. The white belt husband frequently says, I would do more if she just appreciated me, or I would communicate better if she were less critical. He treats growth like a negotiation. He will change once she changes first. He will become the husband he wants to be once she becomes easier to love. You see, guys, every marriage changes when one person decides to stop waiting. Someone has to go first, and leadership always moves first. And at Black Belt Husband, we think that that should always be the man. This does not mean that you take all the responsibility for the whole relationship. It just means that you're refusing to use your wife's shortcomings as permission to live below your own standards. When you become a black belt husband, you realize that you don't need to wait for permission to become a better person. You can lead because leadership is not dependent on being mediocre or any kind of reciprocity from her. Black belt husbands ask a very important question: what is mine to own? And then simply completes his side of the street. It's really that simple. White belt husbands wait, black belt husbands lead. Okay, white belt husband, trait number 10, we're bringing it home. The white belt husband thinks he is the hero of every story. So perhaps the white belt husband's most remarkable characteristic is his storytelling ability. You see, in every conflict, he is misunderstood, unappreciated, and unfairly treated. Researchers have spent years searching for the rare specimen who begins an argument by saying, you know what? I think I contributed to this. Confirmed sightings remain exceedingly rare. The white belt husband usually tells the story in a way that always protects his image. He remembers everything he did right, every unreasonable thing his wife said, and the exact tone that she used. He has very little recollection of how he behaved during the 45 minutes leading up to that moment. You see, guys, one of the greatest signs of maturity is the ability to ask, what was my part? This does not mean that you are taking all the blame. It just means you are identifying the only part of the situation that you have the power to change, which is yours. Black belt husbands do not obsess over proving that they're right. What they do obsess over is they obsess over becoming better. They can admit if they have a blind spot without believing that they're worthless. And he can take responsibility without collapsing into a big gushy pile of shame. And that is why black belt husbands grow. That is why his marriage changes. His marriage improves. That is why people trust him. White belt husbands protect their image at any cost. Black belt husbands protect their relationships at any cost. Okay, if you recognized yourself today in any of these traits, awesome, that's very good. That means that you're awake. The most dangerous white belt husband is not the one who sees his patterns. It's the man, it's the white belt who believes none of this applies to him. White belt husband doesn't mean that you're a bad guy, and it doesn't mean that you're a bad husband. It just means that you're untrained. You may be loyal, deeply committed to your family, but love without proper training can still produce good intentions and painful outcomes. Every black belt you have ever admired in life at anything always started as a white belt. He did not become skilled by pretending he already knew what he was doing. He became skilled by training, accepting coaching, practicing under pressure, learning from failure, and continuing to show up. There is no shame in being a white belt. The only shame is being a white belt and pretending that you're not a white belt. So the question is not whether you have ever acted like a white belt husband. Of course, we all have. The question is, how much longer are you willing to stay one? Your marriage does not need a perfect husband. It needs simply a guy who's willing to train, who is still becoming, who can look honestly at himself and say, I may not know everything, but I am willing to learn. This is where the journey begins. This is how a white belt husband starts on the path of becoming a black belt husband.